Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I'm Rick Zanotti, and I'm joined today by our co-host, good friend, Susan Nash, Dr. Susan Nash. How are you, Susan?
I'm great. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we had a quick 2-week vacation. Now we're back to the grind, aren't we? But this is a very fun grind. We love interviewing people.
We certainly do. We have a great guest.
We do, and let's run our intro, and we will introduce him. Here we go. And we're back. Susan, you're a pretty giving person, I would say. What do you think?
It depends.
It depends. Well, more often than that, from what I've seen of you, you're pretty giving. And we have with us today somebody who I think kind of wrote the book on giving, or should I say go-giving, and the go-giver. We have with us Bob Burg, who is an author. He's a speaker. He's written the Go-Giver series, which is a wonderful set of books. If you have not read the Go-Giver series, the Go-Giver and the Go-Giver Sells More, and some other books in that series, you've got to read them. They're great. I would make them mandatory reading for anybody. Bob is a speaker. He's done a lot of public speaking. He is a coach, if you will. He teaches people how to apply the principles of the Go-Giver books, as well as he's an animal lover, and he is the chairman and president of Furry Friends in Florida, which is, again, it's hard not to like a person who likes animals. So anyway, with us, we've got Bob Burg, who is also a firm believer in the free enterprise system, which, again, I am totally with him on that. Bob, how are you today?
I'm great. Hi, Rick and Susan. Great to be with you both.
Yeah, we're really glad you could make it today, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you. I mean, I've had the pleasure of interviewing you about 3 times already, so I think this is our 4th, and never run out of questions to ask you. And my first question for you today is, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm often asked what's new, and I always say nothing. Everything with me stays the same, only more so. And I kind of like it like that.
Yeah, one of the things, though, you do have a new version of The Go-Giver coming out. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the book, and of course it was co-authored by a great storyteller and writer, John David Mann, and once the book hit the 500,000 sold mark, our publisher, Portfolio, came to us and asked if we'd like to do an expanded version, and we thought, it'd be a great idea. Of course, you can't touch the story because it's a story. It's a parable, so you can't really touch that, but what we did is we added a question and answer section as well as a study guide right after the content, because we have a lot of book clubs, businesses, churches, coaches, so forth, who use it as study material for their organizations. We also have a wonderful foreword by super entrepreneur Ariana Huffington of the Huffington Post. So we're really thrilled about that. So we're very excited about it.
That sounds good. Now, what was the original motivation for you to do the Go-Giver?
Well, years ago, I had a book out called Endless Referrals, which was a how-to book for salespeople on really how to network, how to build those mutually beneficial give and take or give and receive win-win relationships. And it was a how-to book, and it's been very successful, fortunately. But over the years, I'd read a lot of business parables, starting with I think my first one I ever read was Og Mandino's Greatest Salesman in the World, Klassen's Richest Man in Babylon, and then in the early 80s, the 1 Minute series by Doctors Blanchard and Johnson. And there's been really so many business parables out there, and I love them all. I mean, I just seem to really enjoy them, benefit from. So I thought, what if we could take the basic premise from Endless Referrals, which was that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust, and put that into a short story form within a parable. The funny thing is, I began to write it, and it took all of about a minute to realize that there's a big difference between writing a how-to book, which is the kind of books I'd written, and writing a work of fiction, which is what The Go-Giver would be, even though it would be based on real-life proven success principles and include a lot of factual things in there. It was still a story. And it's one thing to tell a story from stage when it's something you're relating that was true. It's another to write it in a story. Well, you know what? It was outside of my, not comfort zone, it was that too, but I'm all right with that. But it was outside of my strength zone, and I knew I couldn't do the book justice. So I asked John David Mann, who I knew because he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for, and he was my editor. So he always did such a great job in editing my materials, and I knew about him from that particular niche market as a really brilliant writer who was behind a couple of other really big selling parables. And I just thought, I asked him, I said, would you like to be the lead writer, the main storyteller for the book? And he was already busy. But because of the know, like, and trust relationship we had, he said, well, at least I'll take a look at it. And he looked at the very basic idea, very basic sketch I had, and he said, yeah, I think we've got something here. So that's really how it came about.
Yeah, and quite a few million books later, I think that worked out. What do you think?
Not quite that many yet, but we hope it is that eventually.
Yeah, I tell you, I've told you this before, but I gift that book out to a lot of people, and believe me, there are a lot of Kindle sales that I've made, which people just, and I haven't had one person who didn't love that book so far.
Oh, thank you. It's ambassadors such as you that are the reason the book has sold as it has. So, we always appreciate that. That's not something we ever take for granted.
No, and you mentioned all the other parables, and I've read all of those. When I was younger, I read all of those, and I'm not saying this because it's you, but yours caught my attention much better. I related to it very well. And it was a different sense of passion and worth. And I told you some time ago, and I think you couldn't believe me, but to me, this was an equivalent of one of my favorites from the 70s, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. A different, more practical version of it, but I love that book. And your books, I've loved everyone I've read so far, to the point that, if I start gifting books, that means I usually really like something. And you've done a great job on every one of them. And the story is what gets you. At least,
thank you.
And
a lot of that is owed to John, believe me.
No, and I'm sure. But you know what? It's that synergy of the two of you. Now, talk. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, no. I that's so interesting. And I really like the book. I have to say that I wasn't familiar with it until a few days ago. And I'm very impressed with the concept of basically you have to give in order to trigger the good things in the universe. And I like your 5 rules or 5 laws of stratospheric success. And I was wondering how you came up with those.
Well, John and I have both been studying success and successful people for all our professional lives. We've both had businesses of our own. We've both succeeded and failed and succeeded and failed and all those fun things. And these seem to be the principles that appeared every time, this combination of principles whenever someone was successful. In fact, you really cannot be successful without all 5 of these. And even using 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them will get you part of the way there, but all 5 of them are combined with any successful venture, really any successful business, any successful life.
I especially like number 4, the law of authenticity. And I was wondering if you could describe that a little bit.
Sure. Well, the law of authenticity says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And in the story, one of the mentors, Deborah Davenport, shared a lesson she learned very early in her career, and that was that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are all very, very important, they're all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. Now, when you, as we like to say, show up as yourself, day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel very comfortable with you. People feel good about you. People know you, they like you, they trust you. They're much more likely to want to be in relationship with you, do business with you, refer business to you. So being authentic is not just a nice way to live life, it's a very profitable way to live life as well. And And when people don't show up authentically, I think most of the time it's because they don't have the self-confidence to do so. They don't truly understand the value that they bring to others, that they bring to the marketplace. And let's face it, it's hard to show up authentically when you don't truly believe you have anything to authentically show up for. And I really believe that as human beings, we all have two types of value, two types of authentic value. One is what I call intrinsic value, and that's simply, the very fact that you're born, that you're here, you bring value to the table. And it's important to understand that. The other type of value, though, is what I call market value. And market value can be defined as that combination of strengths, traits, talents, and characteristics that allows you to bring value to the marketplace in such a way that you'll be rewarded for it. And we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, but with that, we all have our strengths. And it's important to be able to understand those strengths, because while we want to, in many ways, mitigate our weaknesses, and sometimes our weaknesses are such that we've got to work on them and turn them into strengths, the fact is we lead with our strengths. And those strengths might be a knack for connecting with people. It might be a knack or a sense of developed empathy. It might be the ability to listen. It might be the ability to connect good people with other good people. It might be an ability with numbers. It might be an ability to take concepts and turn them. In other words, we all have our strengths, and it's important that we are able to understand what those are. And sometimes it's difficult for us to do, because as human beings, we're very emotionally often too close to the situation. And that's why sometimes we do need to have a coach or a mentor, whether a formal or informal one, but someone who knows us well enough to be able to help us identify those strengths, but someone not so close to us emotionally that they can't really see it any more than we can.
Well, that seems to tie to the law number 5, doesn't it? The law of receptivity.
Well, sure, because law number 5, the law of receptivity says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. In other words, we breathe out, but we also have to breathe in. It's not doing one or the other. We breathe out carbon dioxide, and we breathe in oxygen. We breathe out, which is giving. We breathe in, which is receiving. And unfortunately, because of so many of the messages that we receive, whether it's from a combination of upbringing or environment or schooling or news media, television, movies, popular culture, we always hear so many we hear so many negative messages about money, about finance, about all these things. How often do you hear or do you see portrayed in a movie the good people are typically poor and hardworking and so forth, and the rich people are mean and nasty and lazy and horrible people, right? We hear these things, and while there's all sorts of people in the world, that's not necessarily the case. But let's face it, the headline, corporate CEO treats people fairly. Yeah. That doesn't sell a lot of advertising. Neither does Boy Scout successfully helps old lady cross street. Right. So we get all these messages about lack. We get all these messages about how awful people are and how the rich get that way on the backs of others. When really, those are what my friend prosperity coach Randy Gage would call memes, lack memes that infiltrate our systems like a virus in a computer, and it can really cause us to have negative feelings about money, about abundance, about ourselves, and about being deserving of abundance.
And it's interesting, Bob, because what you're saying basically ties into the fact that much of the media, especially the news media, tends to be communistic or socialistic by nature.
Yeah.
And so they don't see anything as being good when somebody achieves something. They always have to downplay it or upplay it against somebody who hasn't achieved something, which is their choice more often than not. And
it's really sad, because the media as a whole, for some reason, has a very, as you said, a kind of a socialistic bent, and I don't really know why it is. There's no reason I can explain for that. And I've got to say, and I've talked to, and I used to be in the news media. I was a broadcaster, and I've read books by people like Bernie Goldberg and other people who've written on media. And it's not that there's some conspiracy out there by the news media to paint things in a social. No, it just is their way of thinking. To them, it is natural, and it's how they see the world. And unfortunately, news reporting is not really news reporting. It's kind of putting in your story as you want it to come across. But but again, there's nothing conspiratorial about it. It just works out that way. So I think as even Mark Twain back in the mid-19th century used to say that if you don't read the newspaper, because back then the news was from the newspaper, he'd say if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. And so there's a lot of that. So what we need to do is when we either read the news, watch the news, listen to the news, get the news, what have you, we need to do it with a very discerning mind. We need to always check our premises. And so when we see a report or hear a report that this happened or that happened, let's ask why. Why does that, what makes that reporter feel that way? What's the basis of what they're saying? Let's take it to a deeper level and not just accept the talking heads that we like, whether it's from the left or the right. It doesn't matter. It's to not just accept things because you've been told it. It's to think critically. And when I say critically, I don't mean in a negative way critically. I mean critically in terms of thinking it out.
Right, which unfortunately a lot of people don't do, which is why we're in the state we're in with news media and everything else. Also, they've done studies. Negative news gets more impact than positive.
Oh, right. Well, it sells. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I have a feeling it has to do with misery loves company. So if you're having a bad time and you hear somebody else having a bad time, people are going, "Oh, that's nice. I'm not the only one who's doing this badly or something else." Whereas rather than look at somebody and say, "Actually, it's interesting." Politically, I like Donald Trump as a writer. I've always liked him for years, and he's doing very well now politically. But what I find interesting about Trump, he has never been apologetic for success, ever. He says, I've had it, I've lost it, I've had it, and it's all about working. It's about working hard, doing it, and not limiting yourself. And that's his message, and people go, that's not bad. And a lot of people aren't criticizing him for that.
Yeah. Well, he makes no apologies for the success he's had.
No.
And by the way, to the success he's had that has been based on free market capitalism, I totally salute him. Yep. Unfortunately, he has also taken advantage of cronyism.
Well, yes.
And has bought politicians, their influence, and has done certain things in that way that I don't agree with. And for that, I don't congratulate him. But by and large, what he's done in terms of a free market where people are not forced to buy, but they do because of the incredible quality he puts out. I totally salute him for any success that he's had. And of course, with that, as a result, he's created lots and lots and lots of jobs for others.
Well, I have a question. Okay, this is a challenge. So my favorite restaurant, I was sad to see, was shut down by the health department. And it made me feel a little nauseous when I read why things like cockroach infestation, flies in liquor bottles, lack of sanitation, and not working refrigerator. Okay, so those came out in the Tulsa World, and like everybody was talking about it at work, and they go, "Oh, Susan, your favorite place was like shut down." And after I finished like gagging a bit, then I thought, oh, I miss it. But then I thought, okay, what bad publicity. And they just opened a new restaurant across town. So now we know that Donald Trump wouldn't apologize, but what would you do if you were the owner and your restaurant was just shut down and you had a lot of disgusting reports?
If I was the owner of the restaurant, my restaurant never would have been shut down for cleanliness issues.
Well, let's blame the employees. So you like somehow you went on vacation and came back and this happened. So it was kind of an accident.
Okay. I can't imagine that ever happening, but if it did, the first thing you would do is apologize. And you'd also have to let the people know that I have the buck does stop here. and that it's not that it's my employees, it's me not having taken the responsibility to oversee that, and that I understand that if I am going to earn back your trust, I need to be able to prove that to you. So I invite you to stop in, have a meal, and come back anytime if you want to inspect the kitchen. It's totally transparent. It's there for you to see. And this will be something that we will have to absolutely make sure is at top of mind awareness for us and especially for you.
And what's interesting, Susan, is I've had a lot of friends in the restaurant industry. That's not abnormal to have the insects. And you know what? It happens almost every day, but they get rid of them on a daily basis. But all you need is one inspector coming on the wrong day or whatever, and then they make a big deal out of it. Because a lot of times, how many times did you go to that restaurant and you really enjoyed it?
I enjoyed it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was getting
and you're
a little
alive,
bit,
and you don't know how many cockroaches you may have eaten.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, it happens. It happens in every restaurant. They try to be, most of them try to very hard to be clean and do everything right. But every so often, an inspector can come on the very wrong moment. And like Bob said, if you're honest about it and you ask people for their trust back and forgiveness, it's amazing what you could. There was this show on Food Channel. I think it was called Restaurant Possible or Impossible. And it was really interesting. He was a guy from the RAF. He was the Navy. He was a Navy cook in England. And so he knew how to run big cooking operations. And he would go all over the country helping restaurants in trouble get their acts back together. And it was a fascinating show because some of them did have hygiene issues. Some of them had cooking issues. And it was all resolvable. And he would always say exactly what you just said, Bob. You've got to build trust back. You build a community back into your restaurant, because ultimately a restaurant's driven by a community. And you do what it takes.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the free market system says, go ahead. I'm sorry, Susan.
Oh, no, but I liked what Rick was saying is as a really loyal client and customer and community member, your point about establishing trust and also communicating openly in a dialogue, that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes.
Anyway,
I just did a I just did a blog post about a gentleman who, not a blog post, it was one of the Influence and Success Insights, the short videos I do, and it was about a person who took over as chairman of the Furry Friends when we first took over from another organization. And he was asked, and at this organization, a big problem was nepotism. And when the reporters at the first press conference asked him about nepotism, and they said, well, is this going to be a problem, now at the organization now that you've taken over? And it was really interesting because I thought, and he was a former CEO of a very successful, retired CEO of a very, very big Fortune, really probably a Fortune 50 company. But I thought, he might go, no, it will never be a problem. It was it. But I loved how he answered it. What he said was, nepotism is always a problem. And it sort of reframed the whole thing because he wasn't defensive about it or trying to avoid it. He was stating a fact. In any operation, nepotism is always a problem. And then he said, so this is something that will have to be watched, will have to be handled, and will have to be dealt with accordingly. So I just thought the way he did that was so fantastically transparent.
And I'm thinking, in a Furry Friends type situation, it would be nepotism.
Nepotism, yes, absolutely. But we just go to the Barkery and buy some Danish.
I like that.
So
one question I have too. Okay, could you talk a little bit about Furry Friends, because it's a wonderful organization. I don't know too much about it, and I would really like to know more.
Well, officially it's the Jupiter Tequesta, Florida Humane Society, doing business as Furry Friends. And we have nearly a couple of hundred dogs and cats between the regular office in Jupiter, Florida, and the ranch that we have just north of here. And also at the ranch, we have some horses, we have some goats, we have some pigs, we have a bull, we have a goat. And these are animals that had to be rescued. And while we try to find homes even for those, the ones who cannot be homed, we want to give a life to that where they're comfortable and where they know they're loved. But the goal is we also have a clinic. And so the goal is always to rescue animals, care for them, fix them up, and try to find them a good, loving home. And we're very protective of our animals. Of course, I'm on the board, so I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations. But Pat DeShong, who's the executive director, her team, and all the volunteers they are just amazing, just heart-centered people who have a love for animals, and it's a fantastic thing to be a part of.
Well, you have a bull. What happened, and how did the bull end up in Furry Friends?
It's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, I had the experience last year of attending a bullfight. I found it to be really troubling.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I would too.
I'd love to rescue a few, before they go into the bullfight.
I remember as a kid, I was probably about 6, 7 years old, and somehow I lived in New York at the time, and my mom hated it, but my dad somehow turned on some sort of bullfighting event. It was on TV. And I'm sitting there as a kid going, I don't like this.
Yeah.
It just didn't feel right. I'm going, wait a minute. Here's a guy with a sword with a bull that looks like he was pretty tranquilized. I'm going, something's really wrong with this whole image. And it just made no sense. It was actually a Spanish bullfight. And I go, okay, I don't quite get it, but... and I think that's the last time I probably ever saw a bullfight in my life or had any interest in seeing it. It's just a bizarre event. I mean, we're in California where we have a certain community that likes to do dog fights, and they're illegal.
Well, we have that problem down here. Many of the pit bulls that are rescued were either bait dogs or were actually fighting dogs, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. Some of the stories and some of the animals, how they come in, it would just break your heart. If you're an animal lover, it's difficult to deal with.
Yeah. Well, of the 2 dogs we have now, the one that passed away, she was probably a little bit abused, but her sister, which we still have, was probably a lot abused. And we got her from a rescue, and it was funny because at one point I remember getting close to one of them, and I moved a little too fast, and immediately the one that passed away, the bigger one, jumped on top of the other one as if to take a hit. And I went, oh dear.
Wow.
And we've never had a dog that had ever been abused. So we're going, oh my gosh. So that forced us to be even more patient and calmer and quieter. And, I never bark commands. We've had German Shepherds. You bark commands of German Shepherds because that's how they get things usually. But Collies, no. Collies are more sensitive. These are a combination of German Shepherd Collie. They're mutts, but they're Shepherd Collie mixes. And if you talk to them strongly, it was immediate cringing fear. I go, that's really odd.
Oh.
So we have to be very gentle. And this one just likes to go in our bedroom all day long. It's like we have to pull her out of the bedroom to get her out. I can't take her for a walk because she throws herself on the ground in a fetal position. I go, wow, that's odd behavior. We're thinking of getting a dog kind of therapist or behaviorist to come out and see how can we make her more confident? How do we get her to be less fearful? We're not forcing her to be brave. We're just saying, take your time. She's more afraid of people than other animals, but even still, she's still afraid. But you're right. When you see a dog like that, you go, what the heck did they do to this poor dog? And we don't know. I mean, you can't tell physically, but mentally something definitely got tweaked in there by someone. So it is a shame when you see that. But, Bob, you talked a little bit earlier about trust and likability. And, knowledge of products is important, but I think from a sales point of view, and really we're all salespeople all the time. No matter what we're doing, when we interact with people, we're selling ourselves just by how we are. And how important do you see trust and likability versus knowledge. Because in what I've seen, more often than not, if people like and trust you, they don't necessarily care that much what you're selling. They're more willing to forgive almost anything as long as that trust and likability is never broken.
Well, Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of Dr. Stephen Covey of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen M.R. Covey wrote what I believe is a classic called The Speed of Trust. He calls trust the one thing that changes everything. And what he did in the book, he really quantified trust. And he showed where when there's high trust, things happen quickly. When there's low trust, no trust, lack of trust, that's when bureaucracy sets in. That's when people have to think about it and think again and talk to their cousin Joe and cousin whoever, and the whole thing. In other words, it gets mucked up. In other words, when there's sort of a tax to having a low trust relationship. So trust is absolutely hugely important. Now, trust, as Stephen M.R. Covey says, can be divided up in 2 ways. There's trust in terms of character, which I think is what you're really speaking of, and there's trust in terms of competence. Yeah. Now, depending upon the product or service, if there's no risk to the buyer, if there's little risk, then it really doesn't matter. But the higher the risk goes, the more competence and character come into play. In other words, if you're going to have surgery, you need to know that the doctor is competent, and you also have to feel that he or she has high character. You're putting a lot of trust in them. It's the same with a product that's very, very expensive. You want them to be competent at what they're doing, and you also have to be able to trust their character. If they have one or the other but not both, that really makes the chances less you're going to do business with them. Now, if we were to say, is one more important than the other, I'm not sure that it would be a matter of importance, but I would say one is of more value because it's in less supply but greater demand. In other words, there's a huge demand for the salesperson to be competent.
Yes.
And there is a lot of competency, as much as we might want to say there's not. There is. There's a lot of people who are very talented, very competent. They know what they're doing. There's probably a lesser number or percentage of people who have the kind of character that that they mean what they say and they're saying what they mean, and that they're going to put your interest first before theirs. And only have you buy what's good for you, not what's good for them. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And so anytime basic economics says when there's a high demand for something but less of a supply, the value goes up significantly.
That's a really good point.
So I think high character is something that is absolutely vital, which is why I say that all things being equal, and we could say, or even close enough to equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust.
That's a really good point, because a lot of times I've respected some salespeople that I've worked with in the past more when they told me, you know what, I don't have a solution for you, call this guy up.
Absolutely.
And it's a competitor.
Oh, yes.
But the competitor had a solution, and what we'll do, and this is, I think, what I call reciprocity, I'll buy that other thing from them, but I'll go back to my other sales rep and buy other things from them, because, well, it's like this. If you go to a camera shop, you can go to the internet and buy cameras or video equipment pretty cheap. But if I go to a camera shop, even though it's going to cost me more, I'll buy it from them because they're the ones giving me the advice. They're showing me the stuff. They're telling me what's better.
That's that additional value. Aside from the intrinsic value of the camera and equipment, the additional value is the whole buying experience, which has to do with their excellence, their consistency, their attention to detail, their empathy. They're getting to understand and know what you want, and the gratitude they have for you being in their life and being a customer. Selling at a very basic level is simply determining or discovering what somebody wants, needs, or desires, and helping them to get it.
That's great. And one of the camera places we go to, they reminded me very much of the Go Giver. Our sales rep there, a guy named Larry, and this is Sammy's Camera in Los Angeles. They're a very big operation. I mean, in LA, they've got about 4 or 5 in this Southern California area. They're kind of like a B&H, but a local one, a smaller local one. And Larry's been our sales rep for 14, almost 15 years. He's been there forever. We've talked to him about his kids as they grew up, know him pretty well. And one day I had to go in on a Saturday, and I said, "You going to be in on Saturday?" "Yeah, absolutely." "Well, okay, so we'll see you on Saturday." So I went in there on Saturday, bought all the stuff, and as we're leaving, he goes, "Oh, I better get back home now. I'm going to have lunch." And I went, "Oh, are you going home for lunch?" He goes, No, it's my day off." "Why'd you come in?"
Wow.
He goes, "Well, no, you were coming in." So I go, "No, you didn't have to do that." And he goes, No, it's okay. And then I saw his general manager, the guy who runs the place, and I said, "Hey, I didn't realize this, but as I was walking, I go, Larry came in for us today when he didn't have to. He could have just gave it to someone else, and he would have gotten his commission or whatever. And he came in to service us. It was a $10,000 deal, but he didn't have to do that." And he went, No, don't worry. I've got him covered. I bought dinner and everything for his whole family tonight." I go, "You did?" He goes, "Yeah, I knew he was doing this." And so we left home. I'm getting goosebumps. Just going, that's great. That was absolutely great. That the general manager knew what he did, gave him something for it because he was just grateful, and he took it beyond just him. He gave it for his whole family.
Yeah.
And I
It's
go,
a
that's pretty
fantastic
good.
story because you had everybody along the way
He
who
did.
put that extra effort in. You
Yeah.
had the salesperson, you had the general manager.
And I was the stupid buyer who didn't even know he was coming in for us. So
No, but that's okay. But you also earned his loyalty because you're a great guy and you're the type of person and you are the type of family that he wants to serve. And so it's really, it's everybody being a part of that process.
yeah, and we're honest. I tell him sometimes we go to B&H only because we have credit with them, and our credit with you is maxed until we lower it again. And he goes, "No, it's okay," because he knows we always come back. I think throughout the years we must have spent over $100,000 on him, and he's happy with that. And again, we refer people, and that's part of it too. Like you always say, what goes around does really come around, and it can come around badly or well depending on what's going around in the first place. So that's what I've always loved about your books. They're simple, and in their simplicity lies really, I think, the keys to the kingdom, if you will. And life is short, and why not live it in a good way? And that's what I really enjoy about, especially, and The Go-Giver was the first book I read of yours, though I think I actually read Endless Referrals back when that came out, when I was in my sales mode back then. And I've never been what I call a good salesman. I think I'm a consultative salesman who, I like to find out what people need. It's a different kind of sale.
Those are the best kind of salespeople.
It's a service sale, and but it works. And when I read your book and other books, it just always validates, okay, I guess we're doing it right. We have to keep doing this. Because to me, it's all about trust. Trust is the first key thing. And if you can get past trust, the rest is kind of easy. But you never, like you said, you never violate that trust. Remember
That's
Ross
key.
Perot?
Pardon?
Remember Ross Perot, who used to be a
Sure.
Navy officer, and he ran EDS, Electronic Data Systems, ran
Sure.
for president for a while until he went nuts, and a couple of other things. But Ross Perot once fired when he was at General Motors, he was, I think, chairman or actually CEO of General Motors for a while. He fired one of his VPs when he found out the guy was having an affair. And he told him, "If your wife can't trust you, I certainly can't." And I went, wow, that's pretty good. And I respected him for that. I go, this guy's pretty right on in his thought process, because that not only took a lot of guts, it took a lot of wisdom. So it was interesting.
Well, I have a quick question, just sort of following on that. So when you wake up in the morning, a critical element to success seems to involve your mindset. So how do you prepare your mind to maximize the go-giver mindset?
Well, really, I mean, in the morning when I wake up, I make a point to say a prayer of gratitude, and I'd like to think that starts off, that I begin the day that way. And there's really not, there's not really a whole lot different. There's no magic bullet, as far as that goes. I mean, I like to think I live my life in a certain way. Certainly not perfectly, make the mistakes, but I think the overall way of living is one that, hopefully serves others and serves myself as well, and again is based on a feeling of gratitude.
That's
wonderful.
key too, because too often when you become successful or where things go really well, people become arrogant, and they forget their humility, they forget the gratitude. and it goes away. And then they go, what happened? Now, mind you, some people are just schmucks permanently, and they live that life that way, and they do well somehow. But a lot of people, they get very arrogant, and they lose it. And then they go, what happened? And maybe they'll figure it out, maybe they won't. But that humility of really gratitude, because gratitude and humility go hand in hand. If we're not grateful, it's amazing. It's not going to keep coming. And that lack of gratitude is felt by everybody.
Oh, I agree with you, certainly. You know, that's one reason why when we do something well, it's good to take pleasure in it, but not pride in it.
Right. Susan, do you have any other questions?
Well, I have some, but I just really want to read the books more in depth because they're very, very nice. I really do like the resonance between the different laws and the way they apply to life.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, and I think really the key to your books is, you know, the message, the story, the combination of everything. And yeah, some people, I know one person I gave it to said, but that's so surreal. And I go, is it? And he goes, well, I don't know, maybe, you know. Yeah, he started out with this kind of, is it really? Can it be? And I've told you this story, Bob, and I tell this to everybody, but 3 hours of our giving one time when we expected absolutely zero, and it wasn't even in our brains, and we were almost bankrupt at that moment. We took a real big hit after 9/11, and we went, and somebody asked us if we could do a favor, a vendor that we knew, and we helped them, and those 3 hours the next year turned into over $1 million of revenue, and that $1 million turned into probably 12 million throughout the years of all the work we've done with one particular client, all from 3 hours of free revenue. And, you know, and I asked myself, if I had known that would happen, would it have happened? Probably not. But it was totally, we never even thought for 1 second anything would come out of it other than we were helping someone else.
Well, you just did it. You did the thing because it was congruent with your value system of wanting to provide value to someone.
And that's what, when I read your book, it was like the lights came on of everything we did that moment really kind of fit the whole go-giver attitude of, but it was never planned. And you can never, I think you can't plan anything like that, because if you do, it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen quite that way. You can make sales and everything else, but that kind of stuff where we weren't even trying to sell anybody, just helping with a problem. And that's the fun of really, I guess, when you live and just try to live it correctly. You make a lot of mistakes, like I said, along the way, but it's that net sum. Do we come out ahead or do we go out behind? And you know, and never cry misery, because it's not worth it. Just keep moving forward.
Sure.
Well, Bob, we are at the end of our time and your time. We've been on almost about 55 minutes, and as always, it goes fast. It's a great pleasure having you on again.
I always love visiting with the two of you.
Yeah, and
thank you.
And you know how much we appreciate you. So we wish you luck. When's the new book coming out?
I think October 25th is the actual release of the new edition.
That'll be great. So October 25th, we're all looking forward to the new edition, and I know we've always got good stuff cooking, so I can't wait to see what else you come up with. always a pleasure. So Bob, have a great week, what's left of this week and weekend. Enjoy the rest of summer. You guys are still pretty warm over there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Still are. One of the things I just love about Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. And Susan, is always a pleasure. And if you are watching the show on YouTube, please subscribe and give us your feedback. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, Bob, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Or if you're doing any public speaking soon, how can they see you?
Really, it's just to go to burg.com, burg.com, and they can subscribe at the very top, right? You can see where it says sign up now. They can get my influence and success insights, in which they will also get chapter 1 of the Go-Giver and endless referrals and Go-Givers sell more, and I think adversaries into allies. And they can connect with me on any of the social media and so forth. So we welcome people to come to burg.com and hang out for a while and see what you can find.
That sounds great. Well, and you know what's funny? I have never signed up for that. I'm just going, how come I never signed up for that? I've got to go and sign up. Those are good things. I have all the books, but I've never signed up for the newsletter, and I always like to keep in touch that way.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, a pleasure as always. We will see you soon. Great success and luck with the new version of The Go-Giver. And,
Thank you.
And our regards to your co-author, who also does a wonderful job with you.
Yep, absolutely. I will let him know. Thank you both again. Appreciate you greatly.
Thank you. And we will see you all next week on Life Edge. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.